Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. In this video series, I'll be showing you how to build a fully functional API test automation framework from scratch using JavaScript. So let's take a look at what we will be covering in this series. Once we are done with the basics, we will begin our installation and configuration process and install all the necessary packages to get our first test working. Then we will start adding more tests in our test suite and get ourselves familiarized with the syntax. After that, we will start looking at how to scale our framework. From basic test, we will move on to writing advanced integration test and also learn about how hooks work and when to use it. And we will also look at how to write some negative tests to increase our test coverage. Then we will take a look at how we can easily generate our test data and make it more dynamic using fake data generation libraries. From there, we will learn how we can generate HTML reports using Mochawesome Reporter. And finally, integrate our test with Jenkins. As a prerequisite, all you need is basic JavaScript or programming experience. Rest you can follow along easily. Alright, so you can see we will be covering quite a bit of material here. As a bonus, I will also make my code available on GitHub for all of you guys to clone and use it for any of your future projects. Also, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions, so feel free to add them in the comments below. Okay, so I hope you guys are excited for the upcoming videos. If you are, give me a thumbs up to let me know. So in the next video, we will take a look at what is an API. But before you jump off to the next video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. That's it for this video, folks. I will see you in the next one. Which libraries or framework to use when doing JavaScript API automation testing? We'll be answering that in this video. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. In this quick video, we will go over different frameworks, libraries, and tools we'll be using to do API automation testing with JavaScript. So since we are doing API testing, the first thing we'll need to do is some way to make HTTP calls programmatically, and for that we will be using Supertest npm package. So let's take a look at that package. Supertest is built on top of SuperAgent, which basically allows you to make HTTP requests, and then Supertest provides a high-level abstraction for testing those HTTP requests. Let's take a look at an example. If I scroll down, here you will notice that they are creating an express route. So they are first making the GET request to that route, and then they are validating the data that's being returned. For example, in this case, they are verifying the content type as well as the status code. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to use, and it allows you to add assertion by just chaining this expect commands. So we can continue writing tests this way, but we need a better way to be able to group test or run individual tests. So for that, we will be using the Mocha test framework. Well, Mocha.js, if you're not familiar, is a really popular JavaScript test framework that runs on Node.js. And you get a lot of features pre-built with Mocha test framework, such as you can group your test, or you can skip your test. You can also use hooks to set up or tear down your test. And it also comes with reporting as well as retry support functionalities, along with many other features. So let's take a look at a Mocha test example. So I'm here on the Mocha site. Now let's take a look at how a Mocha test example would look. I'm going to scroll down. Alright, so they have a describe block here, if you notice, which basically allow you to group your test. And you can also have multiple describe blocks inside each other. And then they also have the id block here, which is basically your test case. So here, for example, they are verifying that it should return -1 when the value is not present. And then they're adding the assertion as well as the next step as needed. So that's your basic Mocha test example. Now let's take a look at how Mocha test would integrate with Supertest. So I'm going to switch back here, and if I scroll down, so here's an example with Mocha. So what they're doing is using the same describe block to group the test, and then using the id block to actually make the HTTP request. And they're using the expect block for the assertion. So that's how Mocha would work with Supertest library. Alright, so we saw assertion here. So the next library we'll look at is basically our assertion library. So let's take a look at that. So for our assertions, we will be using chai.js. Now chai is an assertion library for Node and browser, which can be paired with any testing framework. So in our case, Mocha.js. So let's take a look at a chai.js example. So I'm here on the chai.js site. Now to write assertion, chai provides multiple interfaces, which is basically different ways for you to write your assertion. So they have should, expect, and assert. So whichever style you're comfortable with using, you can use that in your test. Now, for example, for should, you're going to use it food.should equal bar, or for expect, you're going to use it expect food.to equal bar. So it's just a way for you to write your test, and whichever one you prefer, you can use that in your test. So it's pretty straightforward to use. Now let's see how it will work with Mocha. So I'm going to head over to Mocha site and just do a quick search for chai. Okay, so over here, let's see if let me search more. Okay, so if you notice here, they're using chai as their assertion. So they're using the assert library. So within the chai, they're using assert, which we saw just now. And then in their test, so they're using the test, and then they're using assert.equal, basically their actual assertion. So same way, whichever one you prefer, you can use either assert or should or expect. Now once we have added assertion, we can start writing tests with no issues. However, we still need some way to see a report of all the tests we are running and see the pass and fail status of each. So the good thing is Mocha comes with pre-built reporters which we can use. So let's look at them. So I'm going to search for reporter here. Okay. So by default, it comes with this spec reporter, which gives this nice simple terminal result view. And while this is sufficient enough when we are getting started, but later on we'll implement nice HTML report. So let's take a look at that. So we're going to be implementing Mochawesome reporting tool. So what I'm going to do is jump to Mochawesome npm package, and then we'll read more about that over there. So Mochawesome works really well with Mocha reports. It has nice modern look, and it also supports for test as well as suit nesting. Plus it also shows you the before and after hooks, and the best thing is it shows you the code along with each test, which is great for debugging purposes. So we will be implementing this with our test framework. So once we are done with reporting, we'll integrate all of this with CI/CD tool, and for that we will be using Jenkins. Now Jenkins is a popular open source continuous integration tool. So to put it simply, it helps you build, test, and deploy your software projects. And Jenkins can also be easily extensible with hundreds of plugins that it supports, so it makes the overall tool quite powerful. So using Supertest, Mocha, Chai, and Mochawesome reporting, we will create a test automation framework and integrate it with Jenkins. So hope you guys are excited as we'll begin our installation process starting next video. It's time to install the necessary libraries and frameworks required to build JavaScript API Automation test framework. So let's get started. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. If you're new here, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. Alright, now let's take a look at what we need to set up our base test framework. So there's a couple of things we'll need. First off, we need to make sure we have Node.js and npm installed so that we can install these packages. I'll add a link in the description below for Node.js installation if you do not have that installed. Alright, and then we will need Supertest to make API calls, Mocha.js for our test framework, Chai.js for our assertion library, and be able to use ES6 and above functionalities in our test. So one thing to keep in mind that these libraries and frameworks that we are going with are only for this tutorial series. If you want, you can replace any library and framework and go with whichever one you prefer. So for example, instead of using Mocha, you can use any other test framework, or for Chai, any other assertion library. Same thing with Supertest, you can use either Axios or Fetch and just replace it with whichever one you prefer. Alright, now let's begin the installation process. So I'm going to pull up the terminal. You can open up any of your favorite terminal in Mac or Windows. So first thing we're going to do is verify if we have Node and npm installed. For that, I can do node-v. This will show me the Node version if it's installed. If it's not installed, you can follow the link in the description below to get that installed. Same thing for npm, I will do npm-v and it will tell me the npm version I'm using. Okay, now that I have both of this already installed in my machine, I will go ahead and set up our project. So for that, I'm going to create a new folder, and then name this Super API Test, and also cd into this folder. So Super API Test, awesome. So my new folder is created and I'm inside that folder now. So what we need to do now is initialize our npm project. For that, I will do npm init-y. There you go. So our package, the project is initialized now. So what we will do now is start installing our packages. So what we need is basically Supertest, Mocha, Chai, and Babel. So let's install those. So I will do npm install -- save dev to install it as our dev dependencies, and then do Supertest. Then we need Mocha, Chai, and for Babel, there's actually a couple of packages we'll need. So let me just copy that and paste it over here. All right, so we need Babel CLI, Babel core, and then a couple other for register and preset in. So I will hit enter and this will begin installation. So you don't have to type it all this out. I will add the link in the description so you can copy that and just paste it to begin your installation process. So we're gonna wait until all of this is installed and then we'll be back. So our package is installed and I've opened up the project in VS Code. Now if I go to package.json, I can see all the dependencies that we just installed. So we have our Mocha, Chai, Supertest, and Babel. So for Babel, we did our installation, but we also have to configure it with our project. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you do not want to use ES6 in your test, then you can skip this step. But for our test framework, we will be using that. So what we're going to do is actually create a Babel RC file. So I'll do Babel RC, and over here, basically configure our Babel. So I'll do presets, and then add in our configuration, which is at Babel/preset and oops, I spelled that wrong. Okay, so this is just a one-time thing. You don't have to worry about doing it again and again. Once this is configured for any of the future projects, you can just keep using this setting. Okay, now what we also need to do is configure our Mocha with Babel. So for that, I will create a Mocha RC file, and this will be a YAML file. And then over here, we will just register Babel. So we'll do require at Babel register. Okay, so that's done. So pretty much that's all we need to do our Babel configuration. So in the next video, we'll begin writing our first test for this gorest.co.in website. And for that, we will start off with using the users API. So to do that, let's make sure our setup is actually working. So I'm gonna head back to VS Code. And what I'm going to do is create a new folder, call it test. And then within that, since we're going to be automating the users API, I will create a file called users.js. I won't add anything in here, and I'll go to package.json. Now, in order to run our test, we need to run the Mocha command. So to do that, what we're going to do is change the script test over here. So we're going to change this to Mocha. So what this will do is when we will run the npm test command, it will execute this Mocha command over here. So we can verify that by opening up the terminal, and I'm going to do terminal, new terminal, and over here just going to type in npm test, and this will run this Mocha command over here. So it's doing Mocha, and awesome. It said 0 passing because we do not have any test over here. So that's expected, but at least our setup is actually working over here. Okay, so that's all we need to set up our base project for now. And all of this code will be available on GitHub for you to access so that you can quickly clone the project. And I will add the link in the description below. So in the next video, we will begin writing our first test. So hope you guys are excited for that. Let's begin to write our first API test using JavaScript. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. If you're new here, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. So in this video, we will start off with writing our first API test using JavaScript. Make sure to watch my installation video if you haven't already to see how to get your base framework set up, and rest you can follow along from this video. Now let's take a look at what we will be automating. So in the previous video, I mentioned that we will be using this website, which is gorest.co.in. So this website basically provides us with a bunch of free APIs to use. So the very first thing we're going to do is click on the login button here. And then it's going to ask you to do authentication. So you can do it via Google, Facebook, or GitHub. In my case, I'm going to do it via Google. So once I'm logged in, I'll be back. So once you're logged in, you will see this screen with your access token, which we will be using throughout our videos. You can also click on the regenerate access token, which will basically give you a new token. So make sure to note this down as we will be using that throughout our videos. Now let's go back to homepage. So I'm just going to copy this first and then go back to homepage. Now over here, the very first API we're going to be automating is this one, which is public API/users. Now if I open this up in the new tab, so it's opening up this page and it's basically doing a get call on /users API. And we can find that out by doing right click, inspect, make sure you're using Chrome for this. And if I go to network and I'm going to reload, and I can see this users over here. So this is the users API we're going to automate. So we have the users call here, we are doing a get call and we're getting the status code. We can also see the response, which is the entire thing over here, and it's also in a nice format here. I can look at preview and kind of see the same data that we're showing up over here. So let's get started with this and begin to write our first API test. So I'm back in VS Code, and over here we're gonna write our first test. So in a previous video, we created this users.js file. If you haven't created it, make sure to create it under the test folder. And in our package JSON, if I scroll up, we have the script where we are basically just running Mocha. So Mocha will find this test folder and any files under that it will run. So if I do Mocha right now, or just do npm test and hit enter, this would run this Mocha command and it will try to execute our test. So in this case, we don't really have any tests, so it will just say 0 test passing. So let's see if this works. Okay, there you go. So that worked. It says 0 passing, and it took a while to actually run this. Okay, so I'm going to go back to users.js, and over here, we're going to begin to write our first test. So the first thing we need to do is, since we're using SuperTest, we have to import that library. So I'm going to do import SuperTest from the SuperTest library. There you go. So this is the first thing. And second, once we have imported SuperTest, we have to actually do create a request basically. So I'll do a const request. So you can name this anything, it doesn't really matter, but request is standard, so I'll do that. Now we'll do SuperTest, and SuperTest takes a URL, so either an app or URL. In this case, we will pass in our gorest.co.in URL. So I will do that. For that, I'm going to go back to the site over here, copy this, head back to users.js, and then basically paste this here. Okay, so one thing to notice is this is their overall URL. This is not their API. For their API, they actually have a separate URL. So if we go back here, this is the URL that they have for their API. So we have to add that in. So if you notice here, they are doing gorest.co.in / public APIs and then / the users. So actually we will add this in. So I'm going to copy this here and then go back to VS Code and basically paste that here. Okay, awesome. So we have our request created. Now we can actually start calling this request, add in users API, and then actually create our test. So let's get started. So we have our super test created. Now next thing we're going to do is using Mocha, I'm going to create a describe block, and then I will do users, and then I will create another it block. And then I would do, since we're doing a get on users, I will name that same thing over there. And basically then this is where we will start writing a test. So far what I did is created a describe block. What this does is basically group our multiple of our test, and it block basically is our actual test. So the first thing we need to do is create a request.get. So I will do request, and then here I can do .get, since we're doing a get call. And this is the users API we are automating. So I'm going to do users. So it will do basically this particular thing / users. So it would add in a users over here. So I'm going to do users, and then we need to make sure that we are passing in the token. So the way to do that is if I actually head back to Chrome. So I'm going to go to the first tab, and if you notice they have a REST console here. So if I open that up in a new tab, so here you can see basically you can make an API call over here. So this is a REST console, just like Postman. They have provided the web version of that. So they are doing a get on the public API users, and they're providing this authorization, and this is the token that we are using. So they're doing this bearer and then providing this token. So there's one way of providing this, but what we will do is the other way. So if we scroll down, they're going to show you the different ways you can pass in the token. So one is the basic auth, where you're sending in the username password, and the other is through query parameter. So this is the way we're going to use, is through question mark here, access token, and then pass in our token. So let's do that. I'm going to go back to our test, and over here just pass in the token. So it's basically going to take the token here. So what I'm going to do is copy that token from Chrome. Actually, let me go back there and go here, access token, copy my token, add back to VS Code. All right, and then basically paste our token here. So that's good. So we have our request.get, we're passing in this users API and then passing in the token, and we have added the token in there. So that's good. So this is becoming really long. So what we can do is, actually I'm gonna remove this from here, then create a new token. So I'll just do const token, and then basically put our token here so that the string is not that long, and I can replace this with token. Change this to use the string over here, template string. Okay, so this way we have our request get users, and it's looking much cleaner. We have the token over here. Awesome, so we have that. And now we need to get the response from the actual token. So we do that by doing end error. We pass in the error response, and then using the error bracket. Okay, so over here is where we will actually get a response. So we can do that by doing, first of all, console log. So let's print it out, res.body, and we will also do res.error just to see what it will print up, or sorry, just the error. Okay, so that's good. And one thing we need to make sure, okay, if I'm running this test, so we have everything covered here. So I will do npm test to run our test. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it did get users and the test passed. And we are basically seeing all the response over here. So error is basically null, and then we see all the response that came over here. So that's perfect. This is exactly what we wanted, and it will match what we saw in the Chrome API call over there. So now it's time to add our assertion. So for our assertion, we will be using the child library. So let's import that. I'm going to do import, and we're going to use expect interface from the child library. So I'll do import expect, not export default, import expect from child. And I'll save this. Okay. Now we're going to add in our session over here. I will remove the console logs. To do that, we'll do expect. Now, what are we actually asserting? So if you notice, I'm going to scroll up. So we have our data, which is coming up with all this array, and it has the total length of 20, which is the limit we have added over here. So to make it really simple, what we're going to do is that the data is coming up with some kind of length. So maybe, actually, let's make sure we do that the data is not empty. That's all we're going to test. So what I'm going to do is add res.body.data, and this should be to not be empty. So this is one of the chai assertion that you can add in here. So expect something to not be empty. So let's run this to see if this actually works. I'm going to do npm test. We'll run this. Okay, so our test ran, and there's basically no error. So it took overall 44 milliseconds and everything passed. Awesome. So this is exactly what we wanted. So our first test is completed. So before we move on to the next test, let's make sure to fail our test. So the reason we are doing that is every time you write a test, what you should always try to do is make sure your session is actually running. So you will see what I mean by that. So right now we are verifying if this is not empty, right? Now let's remove not and expect it to be empty, right? So we won't change anything else. We'll keep everything else same, and we'll make sure that the data returned is empty. And we'll run this again. Okay, so let's see what happened there. Let me pull this up. So we see that our test passed, which is weird because it shouldn't have passed. It should have thrown an error. And if you notice, there is an error right after that. So it says assertion error, expected array 20 to be empty, which is exactly what we were expecting. We were expecting this to be empty, but technically it's not because we're getting the data back, right? So our test should have failed. So what exactly happened here? Well, let's take a look at this. So what's happening is when we are making this get call, it's an asynchronous call. That means it's actually running and it's taking some time for the response to come back. So it's happening in the background. So maybe this is taking, let's say, 30 milliseconds for this whole thing to be completed. So what Mocha is looking at is, okay, it runs this command. It's making that API call. It says, oh, there's no particular error. It basically skips over this assertion because this is part of the whole one thing. And it comes to the next line. It says, hey, is something in here? Well, there's nothing there. So it just says, okay, everything looks good. There's no error and the test is working. So once basically the whole thing passes, and you will see the reason we saw this error is because afterwards, this callback comes back, or the asynchronous call actually passes, and then we will see, oh, well, something went wrong and this failed. So how do we fix this? Because we want our test to fail the moment there's an error, right? So to do that, we will add in a done condition. So what done does is, I will add in here, it's basically a done callback, and we will add done here. So it will wait for this done callback to be initiated, and this will happen only once basically we run our request.get. Mocha will see that there is a done method over here, or done callback over here. So it will wait for this to be completed. So basically it will wait for this asynchronous call to be completed because it knows there is a done there, and then only it will actually move on and complete our test. Until this is not done, it will keep on waiting. So if we run this again and I do npm test, there you go. This time our test actually failed and we got a proper error. So it says uncaught assertion error, expected array 20 to be empty. That's perfect. This is exactly what we wanted. We want our test to fail because the data is actually coming back. So this is good. This is exactly how you would want to write your test. So I'm going to change this back to not be empty, which is the right case. And I will run npm test again. Awesome. Now our test is working. And if you notice here, it's actually taking like 1132 milliseconds, which is more than what it was taking before. So before it was, if you scroll up, actually I can find it up below over here. No, scroll up. Okay, so it was only taking 40 milliseconds because like I said, it runs this, it says, hey, nothing is happening. It will move on to the next thing and it will say, oh, our test is working, everything is great. And this is asynchronous call is happening in the background. And while that's happening, obviously this is taking like 1000 milliseconds. So this time it actually runs this. It says, oh, there's a done callback over there. So it waits for that to be completed. And then only it will actually finish our test. So the overall thing took 1 second. Okay, so this was basically our first test. Hope you understood. All we did was basically make a get call to our users API, added in our token, and then we added our assertion. And after assertion, we added this done callback, which is basically waiting for our test to be completed. And once this is working, our entire test passes or fails depending on whichever condition you have. So there you go. We wrote our first API test. Hope you didn't have much issues writing that test. Let me know in the comments below if you have automated your APIs in the past. If so, which tools and technologies have you used? So in the next video, we will continue writing our get test and explore different ways to write get test. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, as that's how I know you guys are really enjoying the content. And if you'd like to support my work, you can do that by buying me a cup of coffee. Let's take a look at how to work with get methods when doing API testing with JavaScript. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. If you're new here, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. So in this video, we'll continue to write API test for get methods. In the previous video, what we did was write our test for the /users API. So if I open that up over here, so here what we did was basically write a simple test for /users, made a get call, and made sure that the data returned is not empty. So in this video, what we're gonna do is kind of do the same thing, but instead of hitting the /users route, we're gonna hit the /users/id. So what we are doing is, instead of getting the data for all of this, we'll get a data for an individual one. So for example, if I do get id /1, I should get the data for this particular part. So let's do that. I'm gonna do, let me open up the network tab. I'm gonna do inspect. Go to network. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now, /users/1. So it returned us this data, which is exactly what we wanted. And if I go here, we just made our API call, which is get call on the /users/1. And I go to preview, I can see the data that's being returned. So this is pretty straightforward. This is what we're gonna do and see if it works for us. So let me head over to the code section. So this is the test we wrote for our get users route. One thing I wanna do over here is, what we did was added this done callback to handle the asynchronous behavior. Now there's two ways to handle this. So if I just copy this and paste it below and just comment all this out. And if I remove the done, okay. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of putting done over here, just return this whole thing. And instead of passing .end, I will do .then and remove the error from there. Okay. Now basically what we are doing is, instead of handling the asynchronous behavior by the done callback, what we are doing is just returning the promise. Even that way, Mocha will know that we have to basically access the URL over here, or basically access the route over here, then wait until this resolves or the promise resolves, and then look for this particular line for this assertion, and then move on to the next one. So this is another way to write tests and working with the asynchronous behavior. So it's up to you, whichever one you want to follow. If you think this one is easier to read, you can do this, or if you prefer to use done callback, that's easier too. So if I just run this, just to let you know that even this works, npm test, there you go, even this worked. So same thing as the last time, our test passed, there's no issues. And just to make sure that this is actually being run, I can remove .nar, and then if I run this again, obviously this should just throw us an error. Yep, there you go. So that's working. Awesome. So it's up to you whichever way you want to use. So we're going to continue using this way as it's easier to read. So let's do this. Now I'm going to keep this over here. I won't remove this. What I'm going to do is create a new test for an int block. And this time what we are doing is doing a get on the user's ID. So we'll do get users / ID. And same thing, I'm just going to copy this, put it over here. Instead of doing /users, what we're going to do is just users /1, and everything else will remain same. Our session is also same. We'll expect it to not be empty. Let's run this to make sure if it works. There you go. So that worked too. We just did get /users ID and it's working. So our session is same. What we're going to do is actually, instead of just checking whether it's not empty, we're going to verify whether this ID is what is being returned. So what we're going to do is we have rest body.data. We're just going to do .id should be equal, and we'll just say 1. So we're just verifying the data being returned, which is this ID is actually what we're getting back over here. Okay, awesome. So even this worked. So this was it. I mean, just doing a /ID, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is make sure whatever the data you're putting it over here is what you're getting back. You can add in some extra assertions if you want. It's totally up to you, whichever way you want to handle it. So with get request, we can also work with query parameters. So what we can do is basically pass in anything after this question mark over here would be our query parameter. So in this case, we are already passing in the access token. So what we can also do is pass in additional information, which we can use to filter down our get request. So to give you example, we can filter the user's data by, let's say, gender, male or female, or we can filter it by status, active or inactive. This is what the API provides us. So let's go over to the API documentation and then take a look at how we can do this. So I'm back here in this website, gorest.co.in. So if we scroll down, you can see, let's take a look where it is. So with get users, they are allowing you to pass in some additional query parameters. Yep, there it is. So you can filter it, for example, by page, or you can filter it by some other information. So let me go over here. We have this users. Let me remove this, search for all the users. So they said that we can actually filter by page. So let's try that out. What I'm going to do is add in a question mark here and do page equals, let's say 5. There you go. Now we're getting data for page number 5, and this is all that information regarding that. So this is a great way to filter it out if you just want to skip over and go to some specific page to make sure that's working. Another way we can do is filter by the fields over here. Now let's say if you want to filter by page on page 5, anything that has gender with female. So I'm gonna do basically we did question mark page equals 5, and I'm gonna add end and do gender equal what are we saying, female, right? So let's try that. There you go. So we just search for that. It's on page 5, and then we're getting all the gender with female over here. Same over here. If you scroll down, yep, all female. Awesome. And maybe if I want to do another filtration, I want to do status active. So I can add in end over here again, and then do status equal active. Now it's more even filtered out. We can see gender female, status active, and this is perfect. We can actually do all this for all the other ones. So let's try this out. We're going to do this and we're going to verify in our assertion whether it's page number 5, gender, and status. So let's try that out. What I'm going to do is copy this, page equals 5 and all this whole thing. Head over to our VS Code. Okay, and then create a new test. So I'll just copy this actually. And then let's create one which is get users with query params. Okay, so in this case, we have to, since this URL is getting like too long, what I'm going to do is add in and create a variable here, call it URL, pass that over here, and then actually put all of this, this much, over here, and do end. Awesome. Then we'll replace this with URL. Alright, so this is good. It's actually much more readable now. So what we're doing a get on this. We have passed in the query parameters. So what we just did is basically added on top of the access token. So we added another access token and then everything else that we need to add in over here. Then I think everything else remains the same. Our actual assertion that will change. So let's say if we want to verify it's not empty. So let's do that. And if I run this now, npm test. Okay, so that passed. So that's pretty good. This is what we wanted. But one thing to keep, what I forgot to do here was instead of searching for all the users, I'm searching for just one user here. I'm going to change that to make sure I get the data for everyone. So let me run that quickly again to make sure this is working. Yep. Okay, this is good too. Now, obviously, we already did this assertion, so let's try to do something else. In this case, we actually want to verify that it's on page 5, the gender is female, and the status is active. And also, we want to verify that for all the users that are being returned, not an individual user. So in this case, obviously, we'll have to do some kind of a loop. So what I'll do is, I'll just say rest.body.data, and we'll add a loop over here. So I'll do for each. And then we can, since we're getting maybe let's do this. Yeah, data is fine. We're getting a data back, and then here I can add in my assertion. So I'll do expect. So what are we expecting? We have data, and I want to make sure that the gender is female and the status is active. So I'll do data.gender to equal female. Okay, so that's good. I'll add another one. In this case, I want to make sure the status is active. All right, now, oops, I have to add the status. Okay, so this looks good. Let's run this to see if this works. All right, even this worked. That's pretty good. So like I said, every time we add a test, let's make sure to fail it so that we actually know if our sessions are working. So to do that, let's change this to male to see if that would actually work. If this one works, we can assume that the next one would work too. Okay, so that failed. Awesome. This is what we were expecting. So expected female to equal male. Awesome. So this is great. We're actually getting female back, but instead it's showing it's male. So that's good. So this way we can actually verify if our sessions are working and it's actually being hit. Alright guys, so that was it. We created 2 more get routes. So try this out on your own and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. In the next video, we will take a look at post route to see how to create new users. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel, as that's how I know you guys are really enjoying the content. In this video, we'll take a look at how to write API test for post method. So let's get started. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to my channel Automation Bro. If you're new here, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. So let's take a look at the endpoint that we will be writing the test for. So I'm back here in our website gorest.co.in. I'm gonna open up the REST console over here. Make sure you're logged in here so that you can see the token being generated for you. I'm gonna select post route. So we have been working with the /users route. So I'm gonna hit send. Okay, so here it's telling us the data that we need. So it's email, name, gender, and status. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just paste the data that I actually wrote before. So this was email, some random email, some random name, gender, status. If I hit send, see if this works. Okay, awesome. So this is working. We are getting 201 status. Our data is being generated. We can see ID, name, email. Perfect. So that's good. So this is basically what we're going to do. We're going to create a new user and try to see if we get the status code 201 and the data that we are getting data being returned over here. All right, so let's jump over to our code and then implement this. All right, so let's start creating our test. So these are all the tests that we wrote before. What I'm going to do is create a new it block. Actually, let's do this and then name this post/users. That's the route we are hitting. I'm going to do return request.post. So this time make sure not to put get. We are working with post route, so do .post. And then for the URL is /users or just users. And one thing to notice here is for the access token, we were passing it before using the query parameter. Now, what I noticed when I was trying to actually test this out, that the query parameter wasn't really working for the post route. Now, what we're going to do is look into an alternative way to do that, and which is basically how we were doing it in the REST console when we were testing it out in Chrome. If I open this up again, we were passing the token via the header. So we were doing the authorization and passing this bearer token over here. So we're going to do this exactly this way, and let's see if that works. So I'm going to head back. Okay, so we have .post users, and we're going to set our token. So you do .set. So over here it tells you that we need to provide a field cookie and some value. So our field would be authorization, and then the token itself would be, actually let's do this, bearer space and the token that we have. So that's obviously token. Okay, and now what we're going to do is pass in the data, our payload. So I'm going to do .send data. We haven't created this yet, so don't worry about it. We'll create it right now. And then we'll do .then, same as last time, pass in the response. What I'll do is just print out the response, actually response body. Okay, so this looks good. I just reformatted it, and let's create our data. So I'm going to do const data equals empty. Let's run this to see if it works. Well, it won't work. I mean, it would fail. It will tell us that we need to provide in all the required fields, but that's okay. Let's at least see if our route is being hit. So these are all the other tests. They passed. Actually, all of them passed, but for this one, the fourth one, we can see that it's asking us to provide email, name, gender, status. Awesome. So at least we are hitting that route. So we see that because we're getting all the 422 error code back and the data. And the reason this didn't fail, because obviously we don't really have an assertion here. So according to Mocha, it doesn't really know that something failed here. It just gave us the 422 error, which is good. So now let's actually go here and add in our data. So like it said, we need an email. So I'm going to do test@mail.ca. Actually, they might have that. So I can probably do test2, I believe. I don't think they had that. We'll see. We'll do first name. Then the name was, actually, what was the required field? Let's make sure. It was just name, not first name. It was name. I'll do test name. And then the gender, can do male. Status could be inactive. Okay, so that's good. Now let's try to run this, and this should actually work. We should get our data back. All right. Awesome. So this did work. We got our status code 201. Awesome. And then the data over here is being returned. So we have our ID that got uniquely generated. And then we have our name, email, gender. This is exactly what we passed in, as well as some additional data over here. So that's great. So this is exactly what we wanted. What we're going to do is add in an assertion over here to validate that this is the data actually being returned. So to do that, we can figure out what kind of a session we need. So let's see if I want to do expect rest.body.data. Maybe if I want to just verify email, I can do that dot to equal data.email. So this way we are verifying whether the email is being returned. Maybe we can do the same for status, I guess. Do status. Oh, what did I do? Let me fix this. Okay, that's good. And then change this back to status. All right, so this is good. We are verifying email and status. I think that's good enough. Let's run this. Actually, what it's gonna do is probably throw us an error saying that email already exists. But let's test it out. Yep, we got an error. Undefined to equal blah blah. Just okay. So we don't actually know what the error printed out. So let's do this rest.body to see what error we're actually getting here. And I'm gonna do dot only here because I don't want to run everything else. I just want to run this specific test. Okay, so this time it actually printed us the error. Okay, so this is good. So this is saying that the email has already been taken, so we need to provide a random email every time. So for now, what I'm gonna do is just provide a random number after test. So I'm gonna fix this by doing this, and I can pass in, let's see, I will do math.floor and math.random. So basically what I'm doing is generating a random number out of 1 and I don't know, maybe, what is it? Let's do 999. That's good enough. So this will just generate a random number. I'll do test dash so that we know what number it is. And now let's run this. All right, so this time it passed. We got test7085 at mail.ca. If I run this again, it's gonna probably do some other randomly generated number. Yep, 6243. Awesome. So our test is working, our assertions are working, and so this is good. So one thing what we're gonna do is, obviously, like if you notice, I'm adding email and status here. Maybe if you want to verify gender, you're gonna have to do, let's say, same thing for gender over here. Change this gender, but this is too painful, honestly. There's an easier way to do this with Chai. That's the advantage of using Chai. What I'm gonna do is, instead of doing all of this, I'll just say response.body.data and change dot equal to do dot deep include. And what this will do is verify, oops, let me fix this. Verify all of these fields with the data that's being returned over here, basically. So let's run this to see if this will work for us. All right, so that passed. But like I say every time, whenever something passed, don't just move on to the next one. Let's make sure if our sessions are actually working. So to do that, what I'm gonna do is, let's see how we can verify that. I can check that by expecting our rest.body.data, which is what's being returned. Change this to, let's say, just this. See if this actually fails. All right, that's good. That says object tested must be an array map object, but it didn't really get that. Well, let's try to do some other assertion, right? So I think what the good way to do this, what I'm going to do is change our data. So I'm going to change our email to some other email. I'm going to do test.mail, right? So this way I'm actually updating the email, and I'm going to run this. So this should fail, obviously. Yep, okay, so our assertion is also working. It's saying, hey, we were expecting this email to be returned, but instead we got test@mail.ca. So this is now what they were expecting. I guess if I do the same thing for maybe gender and change the gender to, say, female, this should fail too. Yep, all right, so that failed too, awesome. So this is obviously, I was just testing it out just to make sure if our session is working, which it is. And overall, our full test is working. Obviously, I can run this again to make sure this works. But to quickly recap, what we did was we created a request. Instead of using get, we provided post, we provided our route. And instead of using the query parameter for access token, we are setting the token over here using authorization and the bearer token as a value. And then we are sending the data, which is basically this we just created, and we are randomly generating our email. And obviously we have our assertion. So we are verifying everything together instead of doing one by one for each field. All right, so I think that's it for the post route. In the next video, we will take a look at put route that will allow us to update data for an existing resource. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel, as that's how I know you guys are enjoying the content. And also, if you'd like to support my work, you can do that by buying me a cup of coffee. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Hey, what's up everyone? In this video, we will take a look at how to write API test for put method. So let's get started. Hey, welcome to my channel, Automation Bro. If you're new here, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. So let's take a look at the endpoint that we will be writing the test for. So I'm back here in our website, gorest.co.in, and I'm logged in. Make sure to log in and then go to REST console. So over here, we are working with our users endpoint. So what I'm going to do is, since you're working with the put route here, before actually going there, we should know which user we're going to work with. So I'm going to hit send here. And then here we can just pick any of our users. So let's say if I pick this 127, let's do this users/127. If I hit enter or send request, there you go. So we're just getting this user back. And what we're going to do now is go to put and then actually try to change the data for this particular user. So what put lets you do is basically update your existing body, right? So in this scenario, we have this response body being returned. If you want to change the data, let's say the name, the email, gender, whichever field that's editable, we can do that using the put request. So let's test it out. So I'm gonna change in this scenario, let's say change the status. It's inactive. Let's change it to active. I'm gonna go here, make it active, and then hit send. All right, there you go. It's active. So that's pretty good. It's working. Maybe we want to change name also. So instead of saying this, let's change it to something else. I'm going to change it to, let's say, name. And then here I will, let's say, Luffy. And then I'm going to hit send. All right, it's updated. So we have Luffy and the status is active. Perfect. So this is working. And obviously with this put, we need to make sure the authorization is there. If we don't pass that in, it won't really work. So we're going to put this token in our test, just like we did for our post test. All right, so let's head over to our code section and then we'll get started. All right, so I'm back here in our code. And this was the previous test that we wrote, which is the post/users. And what we're going to do now is write our new test, which is put users. So I will just create a new it block, name this put/users. This one would be with ID. So I'm going to do with ID. And then over here, we need obviously a data. So something that we will be changing. So let's do the same thing that we did. We will change the status. Okay, we don't need to put this. We'll do status. Oops. Status equals active. And then we will do, let's say, gender also. We'll change that to, actually not gender. Let's change the name. We'll change name to, what was that? Luffy. And then I also want to change it to some random number because we will test it out by running that test multiple times. So I'm going to copy this exact same code, put it over here. All right, so this is good enough. And I need to fix this and use a template string instead. Right, this is good. So we have our status, we have this name, and this random number that will come in front. So this is good enough. And I will fix this. Right, now let's create our request. So the request is straightforward. If you have been following previous videos, you know what to do here. You can in fact try it out on your own. And you can compare this with my code. All right, so we have return request. This time we're going to use put.
The route would be users/id. So I'm going to take a random number over here. So let's, I don't know, we'll take 10 and I'll assume that it's there. So we'll then create our token, or basically set our token. Authorization, and same thing, which is bearer token. Okay, so that's good. We need to send the data. So obviously this time we are sending this data to update this existing users. What we did previously was sending the data to create a user. That's the difference. Now we will add .then, add in our response. And let's try to just print this out to see what happens. Press.body. All right, let's see if this works. I'm gonna do .only to just run this test. Make sure we don't have .only here. Yeah, we don't. Okay, I'm gonna do, was it npm test, I guess? Yeah. Okay, so our test ran and it says that resource not found. Well, that's probably because they don't have a user with ID 10. So let's make sure that we are picking up a user that's actually there. So let's do that. I'm gonna go back to Chrome. I'm gonna do get on/users again and pick something from here. 132. Sure, we'll go with that. 132. Okay, we're back here. I'm going to change this to 132 and then we will run the test again. All right, so this is good. We have the name, which is updated. We have this ID here too, which is also updated. Well, sorry, ID is not updated. ID is same, but the status is updated to active. So that's perfect. We are actually changing the status. We are doing this. And then what we're going to do is actually now verify or basically add in our assertions here. So for that, I'm going to do status expect. What are we expecting? That actually, you know, we can do the same thing that we did here. This whole thing should match by the data that we are providing. So what we had, if you don't remember what we did before, so we are doing rest.body.data. And the data that actually we are getting back should match this particular data over here. So let's run this and see if this works. All right, perfect. So this is working. That's awesome. So let's actually go back to Chrome and see if this test actually got updated over there. So I'm going back here and what I'm going to do is do a get on/132. And if you notice over here, the name is this, and then the status is inactive. If I hit send, so there you go. We have our status active as well as this name 1931. And we can actually quickly test this out that it's the exact same name that we created over here. What I will do is print out our data and I can do that over here. Console.log press.body.data, and then we'll run this. It's 8914. Let's go back there, do a get request. And it's 8914. Awesome. So our put request is actually working. It's getting updated, which exactly what we wanted. Let me go back to our test. All right. And I will remove this console log from here because we don't need this. You were just testing it out. And that's pretty much it. We created our data. We have a request here and we can pass in any status, any name or any editable fields. Get that updated, verify that with our assertion over here. And that's pretty much it for our put test. And one thing, if you notice that we are passing this hard-coded ID, well, the best way to do this is actually send an ID that we know will for sure will be there. Let's say we don't want someone to come in and then delete this 132 ID, and which happened with us when we were trying with ID 10. So what we will do is in the upcoming videos, make it in a way so that we create a user and then we use that ID for that user to update some data. This way we know for sure that the ID will always be there. In the next video, we will take a look at the delete route that would allow us to delete an existing resource. Hey, how's it going everyone? In this video, we will take a look at how to write API test for delete method. So let's get started. Hey, welcome to my channel, Automation Bro. If you're new here, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. So we will be working with the delete method. While delete is always a bit tricky because once you delete the users, you cannot hit the same endpoint again with the same user because the user doesn't exist anymore. So let's take a look at what I mean by that. So I'm going to click on REST console here. And then what we're going to do is try to find out which user we want to delete. So I'm going to do get on/users. And then let's see. Yep, sure. Maybe this one, ID1. Let's delete the first user. So we're going to do /1 just to see we can access this. Yeah, we can. We have this user over here. Then we're going to go to delete. So for delete, what do we have to do? While the route will remain the same, the URL will remain the same. We don't have to provide any body here because we are just deleting the particular user. So it's basically as simple as doing a get and then hitting user/1. So if I hit send request, there you go. It says 204. That means it passed. And then our data is null. There's no particular data for that user anymore. And meta tag is also null. So what we are going to do is just to make sure that this user got deleted, go to our get test here, or basically our get request, and then hit send again. And then this time it says, yep, 404, the user does not exist. That means we successfully deleted that user. Now what I meant was when I said that the delete is a bit tricky is because if I go back and try to delete the same user again, we will get 404, just like we got for the get endpoint. So that's why it's a bit tricky because you will just hit that particular user once and then it will get deleted, and you will have to, for your next test, have to delete this with a different user. So ideally, what you would do in this scenario is create your user first and then delete it. For this tutorial, what we're going to do is keep it simple. We're just going to use this delete route, delete it once, and then in the upcoming video, we will take a look at a better way to handle this delete request. So for now, let's delete our some user. So what we're going to do is go back to get to find which user we can delete. Go away. Okay, let's see. ID2. Okay, so that exists. We're going to delete ID2. Right, I'm going to head back to our code section. And what I'm going to do is create a new test. So same as the last time, we will do delete /users/ID. Okay. And then there's no data. So this one is really straightforward. We're going to do return request dot delete and then pass in the URL, which is our user/user2. We have to set our authorization and do the same thing as over here. So I'm just going to copy paste to avoid wasting more time. No need to send any data here. All we are doing is just hitting that delete request. And then I'm going to do .then. We get in our response. Now, if you notice the response that we got for the particular body, that was null. So I think what we can do for our assertion at this point is actually just make sure that the data is null. But before I do that, actually, you know what, if I print this out, I won't be able to run this again. So I won't print it out, but we just did that in Chrome, so you know how that works. I'm gonna just add in our expect assertion here. I'm gonna do res.body.data, and I would make sure that this is equal to null. We'll do null, all right. And what else? Let me see if I'm missing anything. Nope. So we are doing request.delete, setting the cookie, and then we are hitting this. Yeah, I think this should work. I'm going to do .only here. And then we don't have .only here. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to run this. This should pass. Yep, it passed. If I run this again, let's see. And it failed. Because this time we do not even found that user, right? We couldn't find that user because that resource doesn't exist. So that's what I meant. If you hit that same test again, you will run into an error. So in the next video, we will reorganize our test in such a way that we can run the same test file as many times as possible and our test will handle that with no issues. Alright, if you like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That's all for this video, guys. I will see you in the next one. Hey, how's it going, everyone? In this video, we will take a look at how we can optimize our tests that we wrote so far to make them more dynamic, and we will do that by getting rid of some of the existing data dependencies we have. So let's get started. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. If this is your first time on the channel, thank you for clicking on this video. I create new content related to testing and automation every week. And if this is something you're interested in, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. Now let's jump right into the code section and take a look at the problem we have with our existing code. So this is what we have wrote so far. We have a get test over here, and we have another couple more get test. We are then doing a post test, put test, and a delete test. So if you remember from the previous video, what I'm going to do is just run the test here, just to show it to you guys. If I hit enter. Alright, so we ran a test. All 6 of them passed, if you see over here. So if I run the same test again, alright, so it's running again, it's trying to hit all of our routes, and then our delete test failed. So it's saying resource not found. And well, what's happening is, if you notice that we are using this existing ID over here, which is 21, and we already deleted this ID, right? So if I'm trying to run this ID again, it's actually saying that it doesn't exist. And we discussed that in the previous video. So what we're going to do, and if you notice, if we let's say come back to this put test, and if someone ends up deleting this 132, so when we're running this test, even this would fail and would throw the same error. Same thing with any other IDs, right? Because we are depending on this particular ID over here. We want to make our test as dynamic as possible so that we can run it 1 time, 10 times, 100 times. It should always pass. So we need to get rid of this flakiness that's happening over here. Well, in this case, it's not even flakiness. We know for sure it's going to fail because that ID doesn't exist. So let's take a look at how we can actually fix this. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to take advantage of the existing test we have wrote, but just change few things here and there to make sure that every time we run our test, it always passes. So let's see how we can do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to follow the CRUD operation over here. We're going to create a data, then we're going to read that particular data, and then we would update it and then delete it. So in this way, we're always working with that particular ID that we created, which we know will always be there. So now let's take a look at how we can actually approach this. So what I'm going to do is create a copy of this file. So here's what we're going to do. We have our describe test. I'm going to remove this. We don't need this anymore. All right. Now, instead of doing a get directly over here, I'm going to do a post first. So I'm going to move this test. I'm going to copy this and move this at the very top. Paste it here. Now I will create a describe block for this just to group this particular test. So I would just say this post and then add this post test here. All right. So I don't need to say this post anymore. We can just say users. So this is good. We have our users, we have this post. Now what we are doing, if you remember from this particular test, is we are creating a new user. So what we can do out of this is when we create a user, we get a user ID. We can take advantage of that user ID and then pass it to all our other tests. So this way we know that user will always exist because we just created it through our test. So let's take a look at how we can do it. So here, if you notice, we were creating the data, and we were getting this body rest.body.data in return. So what I'm going to do is create a new variable somewhere at the top where we can access it. So let's say I can create it here. I can call it let user ID and then assign it to, well, we don't even have to assign it anything. I can just leave it this way. Or we can assign it to null, whichever works with you. All right, so in this scenario, what I'm going to do is once we have verified that the data is there, I'm just going to do user ID equals rest dot body dot I think it was what data dot id, right? So that's what we actually verifying over here. Now if we try to run this, what will happen is this test will run. We will have this user ID captured, and then we will print out that user ID. So let's just do that just to make sure that our user ID is being captured properly. And what I'm going to do is only run this specific test. I don't want to run everything else. I will do npm test. All right, so our test ran, and there you go. We have our new ID. If I run this, it will give me another new ID, which is creating every time we're running the test. Okay, this time we have 1370. Perfect. So this is good. We have our user ID. It's working. Now for the rest of our test, we're going to keep passing that user ID. So here, if you notice, we created this describe block, which is ending over here. I'm going to create another describe block and call that a get. And we will bring all of our get test, put it over there. This is just would be easier for us to know which ones we are going to be running, and we can run specific get test or post test depending on the grouping. So I don't need this get over here. I will just remove that. Same thing over here, and then remove it here also. Awesome. So this is good. And then anywhere we are using an ID. So in this scenario, we are doing directly on users, which is fine. But over here, we are using one, right? So I'm just going to update this with the user ID, which we just created. I'm going to do user ID. So that's good. And I believe we are not using it over here. So we have our two tests where we're actually using this. So I'm going to run both the tests to make sure they are working. I hit npm test. And I think something is wrong with our file. We can see it red over here. Let's see what's going on. Pull up. Oh, okay. I made a mistake over here. This should just be user ID, not $, because it's not part of a string. All right, let's run this. So our post test failed, and it failed because it timed out. Oh, so it probably took more than 2 seconds for it to create the test. And you would see this happening from time to time. Sometimes some particular request will take more than X amount of seconds. So if I run it again, it would pass. Another option, what you can do is actually change the timeout of your Mocha test. So basically what you can do is, and I think this is a good trick, I can show it to you guys. So we are running our test in our package.json, right? If you notice, we created a, if I come back here, we are running it through this, and by default, it has a 2000 millisecond timeout. So we can fix that by just saying, hey, just change the timeout to 5000 millisecond. And this would basically be 5 seconds. And you would do this because if you know, because we are working with a third-party API here, and that it sometimes takes time. If too many people are hitting that API, there will be effect on the performance. So we can come back and change this. Now, if I run this test, it should work. And it's good. We actually found that error so that we can actually put that over here. Yep, there you go. It's working. It only took 1 second this time, which is fine. And all of our tests passed. Perfect. Even this one is working with the user ID. So that's great. So our actual logic of passing the user ID is working. So I'm going to remove .only here. We'll also remove this here. And if I scroll down, we will pass this over here too. So instead of just updating this particular thing, I'm going to be using template string here. And I will pass my user ID. So that's good. I can remove this console log here. So this one already looks good. So just the way we were grouping everything, I'm going to group this one also, call it a put test, copy the entire thing, paste it over here. And this is mainly for the reason, let's say if you want to add in more put tests, you can just group it over here. You can also create separate file, but in this scenario, we are working with the user route. So it just makes sense to just group it this way and easily run whichever one you want. And I would remove this. All right, so that's good. Same thing for describe. I'm going to just create quickly a describe block. And then put this over there. Okay, and then remove this. All right, so this was the one that was failing because obviously we deleted that particular ID, but obviously you know at this point that that won't happen because we just created a new ID and we know that will always be there. So I can replace this with user ID and I don't need to print anything out here. All right, so this is good. If I just run this right now, let's see what happens. Okay, there you go. Our test ran and it failed. And I think this one ran because we also ran this particular file over here. And as you can notice, that one failed because we didn't have that ID there. So obviously, I'm just gonna skip this over here, and we can do it just by putting an X over there, which would skip it, or you can do describe.skip. And what I'm gonna do is run this test again, which is the first one. So it's gonna run this and see if it works. All right, so if you notice, this one got skipped. So we have 6 pending tests and 6 tests that are passing. And I can keep running it as many times as possible, and this test will always pass. And the reason being is the way we have organized our test, is in a way that every time we run particular tests, it's dependent on the previous one, which let me show it to you guys. Hold on. So what's happening is we are creating a user, right? And we have that ID, which we're passing it to other tests. We are passing it to our get user ID. We're passing it when we're updating the ID, and then when we are deleting it. So even if it deletes this, doesn't matter. The next time we're running, we're working with a new user. And that's the advantage we get. So basically for this one particular file, we went through all the routes. We are creating a user, we are deleting a user, we are getting that, updating it, and you can kind of create as many tests as possible. And anytime you have this kind of delete test over there, you don't have to worry about it because we're creating a brand new one every scenario. Now, one thing I do want to mention over here is, so let's say if there's an issue with our post test, for example, we couldn't get this user ID created. And as you know that if because of this, everything else is dependent, right? So all of these tests are technically dependent on this post test. So if this doesn't work, all of the remaining tests will fail. Now, I know that is a downside that we have when we are creating this dependent test. So kind of doing that integration between these multiple tests. Well, in my opinion, it's probably better to do it this way rather than do it where we are depending on existing data that's residing in your test environment or some dev environment. Because anyone can go in there and delete that. At least in this scenario, we know, okay, if posts fail, sure, the other tests fail and they're probably failing because of this reason. Now, maybe let's say if this one timed out, what you can do is have a retry for this particular test, or even you can do a retry overall in Mocha where it would try to run that test and if it fails. So even if let's say a post test fail, we know the other test would fail too, but at least we understand that there's a dependency here. Compared to a test would fail, we don't even know what happened because someone went in there and deleted our particular test ID in the test environment or the dev environment, right? That thing you cannot control, but at least here you can control. Your test would fail. You can come in here, fix this test, run all the other tests and see if it's working. So I think this is way more control and this is probably a better approach to do compared to the one we were doing. Now, I know there are many other ways to optimize this also, but I think for now, this is pretty good. So I hope you got the idea what we did here. If you notice previous file, we were just creating a test and we were depending on a previous ID that's already been there versus creating our own ID over here. Now, I know I've said this probably 10 times now, so I'm going to stop and end this video over here. If you like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Hey guys, in this video, I will show you how you can use async awaits in your tests to make your test look a bit easier to read. And also make sure to stick till the end as I will show you how you can use hooks to optimize your test easily. So let's get started. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. If this is your first time on this channel, thank you for clicking on this video. I create new content related to testing and automation every week. And if this is something you're interested in, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. Alright, so far we have been writing our test this way. As you have noticed, we create a request and then we chain bunch of these method over here. And then we take advantage of the callback if we need to take some additional steps. But there's another way to work with this, which in my opinion is a bit cleaner and readable. And for that, we will be using async awaits. Now, before we work with this test and update this, we have kind of went through all of this and we have worked with all of the users route. So what we're going to do instead is take advantage of different route, which is our post route. The post route is kind of similar to the user route. You can take a CRUD operation over there. You can create a post, read a post, update or delete. So let's jump into the code section and see how we can implement that. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is create a new file. And I will name this post.js. And over here, just the same way that we did, we're going to create a describe block. And we will name basically our describe block the same thing. So I can call it user posts. Right, and then what we will do is actually get our dependencies that we need. So which is this token, requirements, and all of that stuff there. So copy this, paste it over here. Okay, so this is good. So we have our basic setup here. Now let's start creating a test. So the first test we will be working with is create a user post. So what I'm going to do is head over to the Chrome. Okay, so I'm going to go to REST console over here. Make sure you're logged in. And then what I will do is do a post on /posts. If I hit send request, so it's basically saying we need a user ID, title, and a body. So I'm going to paste the sample data that I got, which basically has a user ID, the title, and the body. And if I hit send over here, there you go. We just created a new post. So we have our ID that got generated, which is our post ID, and we have user ID, title, body. And now I can verify by doing post /1281 which should return us this body. There you go. Yep, that's working. So this is what we're going to do. We will try this out with our code and see if this works for us. And while we will be doing this, we will take advantage of using async awaits. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So I'm going to head back to our test. And over here, just like we do every time, we're going to create our it block. And I can do that by just doing it. And then name this /post. We'll get our data created. Okay, so this is good. Now we will actually create a request. Now what we were doing a request, obviously doing a return on this, and then would do a post, provide all the data there, right? Just if you notice like this. So this is what we were doing. But instead of doing this, we're going to change it up a bit. So I'm going to copy this here just so that you can see how this works. And then get rid of this. Right, so instead of doing this, I'll comment this out. We can take advantage of async awaits. Now what async await does is it makes that asynchronous call and it waits for the call to come back. So when it comes back, we can assign the response to a particular variable and then do whatever we want with that variable. Let's take a look how we can do that. The first thing we need to do is in our function, in our it block, we need to let it mention that this is an async call. So we're going to put async over here. So right before our brackets over here, we're going to say, okay, this is going to be an async function. And then we will pass in our await over here and then kind of do everything else that we were doing here. So nothing different. So I'm going to copy this entire thing and then just paste it here and comment this out. Now here, instead of users, we're going to put posts and everything else would remain same. Now this particular thing will return us a promise and we can capture the response for that particular promise over here. Now, if I remove this, what it will do is it will give us a promise that this promise is pending. When I put an await, this will actually wait for this promise to be resolved and give us the data back. So this particular response, it will give us back over here. So now what we will do with that response once we get back is in this scenario, let's just print it out to make sure if this is working for us. So I'm just going to do response.body to see if this particular thing works and then run our test. So I'm going to do npm test. Before I hit enter, I just want to make sure I only run this particular describe block. So I'm going to do .only and then hit enter. Let's see if this works for us. Okay, so our test failed. And if I just scroll up, let's see why it's failing. Okay, so we're getting this error called reference error regenerator runtime is not defined. Now this has nothing to do with our actual test. And what's going on actually is we're using async await, which is advanced JavaScript. And in our Babel, we haven't really configured that. So we haven't told Babel that, hey, we will be using this async awaits in our test. So to do that, we can actually pass in a plugin, which is Babel transform runtime, I believe. So what I will do is just change this to Babel transform runtime. So this will allow us to run async await call in our test. Now we'll say regenerator is true, which is the error that we were getting. And I believe we will also have to install this plugin. So I'm just going to run this because I'm not sure what plugin we need to install. And it will just tell us. So if I run this, what happened? Right, so that's saying cannot find module Babel platform, Babel transform runtime. So let's install this. Once this is installed, we will be able to use async awaits in our test. Okay, so that's fine. Now, what we will do is do npm test to see if our test would work. Yep, that's working now. We got one passing and we have our user ID, title, and body. Perfect. So all of this is working, which is great. This is what we wanted. Now, what we're going to do is instead of console out, printing it out over here, we will capture the or make an assertion here. So I'm going to say rest.body.data. Same as last time, I'm just going to say .toDeep include data. So nothing different here. And then I will just put, we need to get the ID for this particular post. So I'm going to say post ID, which we haven't created this yet, but I will just call this rest.body.data.id. And then over here, I can take advantage of that. Or basically create that ID. I would say post ID. Now this way, anytime we want to use that particular post ID anywhere else. So to give example, if I want to create another id block, And this time I'm just doing a get on posts /id. We can, just like we did for the user advanced test, I can directly use this over here. I'm going to say, make sure to use async await. So I'm going to do await and then copy this entire thing. Let me copy this here, paste it. Instead of doing post, I will just do, oops, this is fine. This would be /id. So we'll fix this. And here I will pass in the ID, right? So it would be the post ID, and this would be a get call. So this is good. Now I have to add in my assertion. I will just do a .expect, and I just want to make sure it's returning 200. That's all I want. So this is nice, short and sweet test. We're just making sure, hey, we created something, if we can actually do a get call on that. So let's see if this works for us. And I'm gonna hit enter again for npm test. Awesome. So if you notice, both of our tests passed, and this is working. So we are actually taking advantage of this particular thing with post ID and putting it over here. So this is no different than what we did in our previous test, which was with our user test, except we're using async await over here. Now, if you notice what we are doing for our data, actually, let me get rid of this because it's just adding too much noise here. Okay, so we are taking advantage of this user ID, which is number 4. Now, this is what we don't want to do. If you remember from our previous video, is that we want to make our test as dynamic as possible. So I don't want to depend on an existing user that already exists in some kind of environment, because anyone can go in and delete that and we won't really know why our test is failing. So the best way to approach this is we create our own user and then we pass that ID to this particular test, and which we were doing over here. We were creating the user, right? So I'm going to copy this whole thing and paste it here right before this thing. I'm also calling this data, so I will just change this to call, let's say, user data. It's good, and then verify this over here. So we are creating this, we have our user ID. Now I will change this to give this my user ID, which I just created. And the reason you're seeing this is actually not highlighted because we're returning it here. I don't want to return this. I just want to pass this over here. Okay, so this looks good. We have our user ID, we're passing it here. And what I will quickly do is do a console log on my response.body just to see what data I'm getting back. If I hit npm test, so our post test failed, and that's because user ID is not defined. Yeah, that's because we never created that variable. We'll create that quickly. Now let's run this. Okay, so that passed and something failed here, but if we notice, we have our user ID. It's saying that user must exist and user ID can't be blank. Actually, you know what? It didn't work. So we are missing something here. Let's see, what are we missing? So, oh, this thing. Oops, my bad. I keep making typos today. So it should be user data, right? So do npm test again. Hopefully it should work this time. Let's take a look at why the test is failing. All right, so if I notice here, so here's, I think what's happening is we are making this asynchronous call over here, but we are not actually waiting for that user ID to come back, or basically this asynchronous call to be resolved. And we are directly passing that over here and then doing everything else. So at this point, and I think that's one of the reasons I like using async await, because at that point, I know that the response will come back over here. Either it will give me an error, or it will provide me some kind of response, versus when I'm using it like this, I don't really know if the response has came back or not. It's an asynchronous call, so it hits this line and then we'll directly move on to the next one. So obviously for now, if we have to fix this, what I will do is cut this whole thing, put it over here. Now what's going on is it will run this thing. It knows there's a callback, so it will get the assertion, get the user ID, and then pass the user ID over here. So in this scenario, this would work. But obviously we have to fix some stuff. I'm using async await over here. So I have to pass that async over here also. And then what else we are doing? Let's see. We are also using res, which is already here. So I can fix this quickly, call this post res. Okay, so I think everything else looks good and we should have our user ID now. Let me run this to see if this test works. Okay, it worked. There you go. So both of our tests worked. we also have our ID that got generated, so we can see this over here. So our test is working, which is good, and this is exactly what we wanted. Now, one thing I noticed is if you focus here that the test ran here, and then after that we got this thing. Basically, again, this is something related with the asynchronous call, and that's because we never really returned this. If I return this properly and then run, this would actually give us proper, right after a test, it would print it out, and then it would run the next test. Yep, there you go. So it ran this thing, our test passed, and then it did this. So this way we know everything is happening step by step. It's running this and then it's doing something else. All right, so we have everything created. Now, this looks pretty ugly. If you notice, we have this user data and then we have this massive request here, right? And this is not good. And all the thing that we wanted to verify over here, the only thing we wanted to verify is whether we can create a post. But we have this massive function over here, right? And which is not good at all, because all we wanted to do was actually create a post and get the ID of that post. I didn't want to do all this, create a user and all that thing here, right? So this is where hooks would come in play. So we can take advantage of hooks. And in Mocha, if you're familiar with it, we can take advantage of before hook. So I would just do before and then create a quick before block over here. And in my before block, I'm going to pass in all this stuff because I don't want it to be in my test. I'm going to put this here, put this particular thing there. And then I have my data, and let's see, and also my user data. I don't need this here. I will pass in my before block. So that's good. Okay, so this was just trying to make sure I have all the right brackets. So now if we run this test, I'm going to do npm test. So our test is working. And if you notice, this time our test is much more cleaner. We are just doing this particular thing here, which is what we wanted to do for that test. So if someone comes in and they're like, okay, what's happening in this test? They know that, yeah, we're creating a data and then we're making this request post call over here and we are verifying it here. Instead, they're taking a look at all of this thing, which has nothing to do with our test. Well, not directly, it has to do with our test, right? We want this to be done in our before block instead. All right, so now just as a one last cleanup, what I want to do is I don't want this entire giant thing over here. So I'm going to move this into a new folder. So I'm going to create a helper folder and then create a file called user_helper.js. And then over here, I will actually pass in or like create a new function. I will call this create random user. And then here make this a function. So pass this thing over here. Oops, go to post, copy this entire thing, and then just dump it here. So this way we can make call to that create random user instead of calling that entire giant thing like in our test, because we might want to use this creating a user some other places too. So it would be a good place to throw it in as a helper. And what I will also do here is make this an async call too, async await call. So what I will do is remove this and then just say that, hey, this has a response that it's getting back here, and make this an await call. And then instead of doing this entire thing here, I can leave my session here or I can remove the session. At this point, I'm just going to remove it because I am probably checking this particular thing somewhere else. So I don't want to throw in an assertion here. It totally depends. Some people like to put an assertion there. But in this scenario, the session won't even work because we are not in the describe block. So that technically won't work. And then I just want to say, hey, my user ID, just get that returned. So I say return. Oops, let me fix this. Yeah, so return the user ID and keep everything else same. And let me fix this particular thing. We have await. I don't need this. All right, so this is looking good. So what we just did, we created a random user. We have our user data here. And then we have capturing that data, that asynchronous call in that particular response variable, and then returning that ID here. And now we can take advantage of that in our test. I will just make this before block. And I will say create random user. It will import it automatically for me over here because of VS Code. And then make this an await. Create random user. Perfect. So if you notice, this is returning a promise, but we're using await, so we will actually get that data back. So in return, we are just getting an user ID back. So I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, now if I run this, let's see if it works. All right, no, something failed. So let's make sure what failed. Request is not defined. Yeah, that's because it makes sense because we never ended up giving all these details to our user helper here. So I will paste that here. And I don't need this. Everything else I don't need MaxSpecChai either. Yep, rest looks good. Now if I run this, all right, there you go. Both our tests worked and it ran successfully. It's looking good. All right, so there you go. Our tests are working. Honestly, I didn't expect this video to be this long. All I wanted to for you guys to see how Async await works and how we can take advantage of before block. But on a bright side, we did get some issues while we were running tests, and that's pretty good because you in real life scenario most likely will run into some issues like this, and you're gonna have to figure out how to debug them, how to fix them. So I think this is a good way for you to kind of see me live doing this. Well, technically not live, it's recorded, but you know what I mean. So it was good for me to just go ahead and figure out what went wrong, and we fixed it over here, and our tests are working, and it's looking much more cleaner. We have our before block here where we are creating this random user. Now I can take advantage of this and put it anywhere I want in any of my other test files because it's already created here. And same way I can, I'm passing that over to all of my tests. So we have this user which is always being generated randomly. So I'm not really dependent on a particular test, which is also pretty good. And then I have all this data, basically just doing a quick verification to make sure if my post request is actually working. Okay, so this was quite a bit. If you have any questions, do let me know in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to help you out. But yeah, that's it for this video. If you like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Hey, welcome back. In this video, we will cover how to write tests for negative scenarios, such as when the authentication fails or when you do not send the right or required payload with the request. We will be touching all of that in this video, so let's get started. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. If this is your first time on the channel, thank you for clicking on this video. I create new content related to testing and automation every week, and if this is something you're interested in, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. Alright, so far we have been writing tests for all the positive scenarios, or you can call it a happy path. And while that is good, with our API tests, we should also make sure that we are covering some negative scenarios too, as that will help us making sure that our APIs are secure and it's functioning as it should. So let's take a look at some example. So I'm here on the website gorest.co.in. What I'm going to do is just scroll down, and if you notice here, there are a bunch of 400 error codes over here, or response code as you want to call it. So anything with 400s, usually that means something went wrong with our API call. So, and same thing for 500 too. So they have a really nice description here. So they talked about with 400, this is caused by various actions by the user, such as providing invalid JSON in the request body or some invalid action parameters. So this is basically when you're sending some wrong data, as that's when the API would end up throwing a 400. And then we have 401. Now this one we have looked at before. It's if you do not provide your token, you'll get this 401 error. And this is the most common one. So we will try to create a test for this one. And then we have something called 403, and this is mainly, for example, the authenticated user is not allowed to access that endpoint. So let's say in that scenario, if you do not have access to, maybe that user does not have access to access someone else's comment. So in that particular scenario, the API will throw us 403. 404 is when that API does not even exist or the resource does not exist. And we saw that when we deleted something, we got this 404 error. And 405 is when the method is not even allowed. So you're trying to do, let's say, a put request on something which is not even allowed, or post request on something. And then there's some more, which is 415. 422 is another one we will look at. This is the one where we send in the data, but our validation fails. So to give you example, we're trying to create a user, but we do not provide the, let's say the name or the some other user related details, for example, gender. So in that way, we would get that 422 error. And we will also look at this when we will be creating a test. And then 429 is something that people add for rate limiting. So just as a side note here, like every time when you hit this API, like this is an external API, right? So they are obviously maintaining this. So you got to make sure that you're not hitting it way too many times here, or in fact doing some kind of a performance test where you're hitting the same API like hundreds or thousands of times under a minute or so. In that scenario, they will actually block you and would start throwing you 429 error. And that's usually what's called the rate limiting. And 500 is when the server fails and the gorest.co.in, something went wrong there, and they would just throw us the 500 error that something went wrong. So what we're going to do is let's try out our 401. I'm going to go to REST console. And this one is pretty straightforward. I'm going to try to do a post on, let's say, our /post API. And here I know that I do not have access. Just keep in mind that I'm not logged in here. If you notice, I'm not logged in. So if I hit send request here, there you go. We'll get this 401 authentication field because we are not logged in, right? So that's why we'll get this error. And the other ones will be, for example, if I'm trying to create a post but I do not provide a proper body, that time I will get a 422 error. So what I'm going to do is head over to our code section and we will try to create some test. Okay, so I'm back here in our code section. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to scroll down, and then I would just simply create a new describe block. So I can create it here, and then I can just, let's say, name this one our negative test, and I can create an it block, which would be, let's start off with doing a 401 validation. So it's actually 401 authentication field. We'll create one for this one. And we will do exact same thing that we were doing here, right? We were trying to create a post, but instead the difference would be that I'm not going to be passing in the authentication token. And let's see what will that throw us. I'm going to skip the expect for now. And then token I won't send. And what I'm going to do here is, or you can also do, instead of not sending token, you can send an invalid token. That's another scenario that you can try out. So everything else is same. I'm sending out the data. I have the post request here, but no token this time. And I'm just going to try to print and see what it will give us. By the way, keep in mind I'm using async await, so I used await here. So I also need to add in the async, make this function a sync function. So there you go. And that's pretty nice. It's just one liner here. All right, so I'm going to try to run this. I will do .only to just run this test. And I can run this by doing npm test. All right, so we ran a test and it passed. Obviously, we didn't have any assertion here, so that was expected. And if I just scroll up, what I did was end up printing the entire response here, but what I just wanted was to print my body. But anyways, if you look at the body over here, we're getting the code, which is 401, and then we have the data, which is authentication failed. And that's perfect. This is exactly what we wanted. We were trying to test if we do not pass in the token, we should get authentication failed. So what I'm going to do is quickly add in our assertion here. I'm going to remove this and then just change this to say the response body.code should be 401. And I can say this should equal, remove this and change this to 401. And then I'll add another one. This time it would be for data.message. And I can verify that it should be authentication failed. So I will just add that in. Okay, and if I run this, this should pass for us. All right, there you go. It's working. So that's pretty good. So we have our first test down. And this is really helpful, guys, because at the end, we want to make sure that, hey, if you do not have a proper token, you should not be able to hit the API, right? That makes sense. Like, we do not want anyone to be just going in and creating a post. We only want authenticated users to be able to go in and create a post. So this test is really good and it's a really nice check. So whenever you're doing your API testing, to make sure to add in such kind of test instead of just going in and verifying the functionality. So the next one we're going to take a look at is, okay, I have this time, let's say my token, but I'm sending the wrong data. So at this point also I should get an error back, and the error that I should get back, that should be 422. So let's go ahead and verify that. And for 422, it's mainly that the data validation failed. So we will also add that in. So I'm going to just quickly copy this because I don't want to waste too much time here. And then paste it here. Just say 422. And then I would change this to validation failed. And what I'm going to do is, instead of this, I'm just going to, for example, not send the body this time, right? Now let's see what happens. But I do want to send my token. So I'm going to copy the token here. Put this here. All right. Now let's, in our body code, it should give us 422 back. And the message itself, well, I don't know what the message I'm going to get. So I'm going to ignore that for now. And I will simply just print this over here, just so I know what error message I will get back. And I will say Postgres. This time I'm going to put in the body. Now let's run to see if this works. And instead of for the whole thing to run, and we'll just run this particular test. And let me run this. Okay, so that worked. And let's see what the error we got. Okay, so this is pretty good, right? So we send that and it's actually telling us, hey, that you did not provide the body and the body cannot be blank. In this scenario, like obviously we didn't provide the body, right? So it's saying the body cannot be blank. And that's pretty good. And that's a good way to check that someone should not be able to create a post through the when they're not actually sending the body. So this is a good way to check, and you can do the same thing for, let's say, title and the user ID too. So what I'm going to do is just quickly add this assertion over here. So I will say, okay, the response data dot field should be body because that's what I actually checked for, and this should be body. Then the next one, the message should be body can't be blank, or can't be blank, just that. And I'm going to fix this by changing it to double quotes. Okay, so that's good. And if I just run this, it should work for us. So something failed here. Let's make sure what failed. It's saying undefined to equal body, and that's probably because, okay, so one thing I forgot to do was, if you notice, this is an array, right? Because let's imagine if you also don't pass in the title, it's going to give us multiple error message. It's going to say, okay, field body is not there, but also field title is not there. So I need to make sure that I'm putting it as an array. And that's a good one because we never actually verified that. And also not to mention that this is part of data, and I also forgot to add in the data here. So I'm going to do data, and then it's array. So I'm going to pass in, okay, it's the first index. And then same thing over here, just change this to data 0 and dot message. Okay, then let's run this, and this time it should work. All right, so our test is working, and we just still have this console log, which I can just remove from here. But we actually got our 422 validation failed, and that's working as expected. We are verifying it through our session. Same thing we were doing for 401. So same way, guys, for any request that you guys are working with, make sure to throw in some negative tests to make sure that API is performing as the way it should, as well as it's properly secure and no one should be able to access it without a right token or without sending unexact data. So try this out on your own and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions. Hey guys, this is another video where we will look at how to optimize our code even further. So we will be creating a config file to store some test data as well as generate some random data so that we are not sending same data every time with our request. And make sure to stick till the end as we will look at how we can use environment variable to store our tokens safely. So let's get started. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. If this is your first time on this channel, thank you for clicking on this video. I create new content related to testing and automation every week. And if this is something you're interested in, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. Okay, so let's take a look at our first optimization that we can do, which will be quick and easy one. So we're using this URL everywhere, which is our Supertest URL, which is gores.co.in/public API. Now, instead of using this URL, hardcoding it over here everywhere in our files, what we can do is throw this in our config folder and then access it from there. So that in future, if you want to change that API or change the URL, you can easily do it from one place. So let's apply that change. So I'm going to create a new folder here and call this one, well, not there. I'm going to create it in the root. And then I will call this one config. And here we can add in our, let's say I'm going to call this one QA.js. So just imagine that this is our QA environment. You might be creating like a different one. Let's say your test environment, your dev environment, or whichever one you have, prod stage. And then here we will simply just do export default and then pass in our base URL. And my URL, I can just copy from here and then just simply paste it here. Now what I can do is, instead of putting it like this, I can simply access it from my file qa.js. I will import that and move this on the top here. And then I can just simply do qa.base URL. There you go. Now we can actually just access this, and obviously if I'm going to run a test, it would still work. So this is good. This is a great way of doing this. But if you notice here, we are also doing a bunch of extra stuff. Like we have this super test, we are doing this QA, and then we have this request here. And it doesn't make sense for our test to have all of this either. So what I will do is also copy this and then simply create another file. This time I can call this one common.js. Think of it as your common config file. And you can name this whatever you want. I just prefer naming it this way. So, and here I will paste all of this stuff in. I will move this up, and so this looks good. We have our super test. We're passing in that from QA.base URL. The only thing I will do is export my request so that I can access it in my post.js file. Instead of requiring the QA file, what I will do is simply get rid of all of this and then require my common.js file. And I can do that by, well, it's not automatically importing for me, so I will import it myself. I'll just say import request from, and this is inner config, and this is common. So that's good. Now we should be able to run our test. So I'm just going to quickly run this to see if this works for us. I'll just do npm test. Okay, there you go. So our tests are working. It's running the whole thing. So obviously the tests are working, so we don't have to worry about that. But this is, look at this. This is much more cleaner now. We are just using one liner here, and we can do this kind of come in here, just replace this with the other ones too, and make sure that those are clean too. So I won't do that right now, but you can go ahead and update your other files. So this is a nice way. We created our QA file, which has our base URL. Then we created this common file, which is actually exporting a request. So that's pretty good. So for the next optimization, what we will do is, if you notice for our post test, we are, in fact, for all our tests, I'm just going to close the remaining tabs. For all our tests, we are creating data, right? We are creating data here, we're creating data, or basically accessing data there, creating some over here. Same thing for our users, we were creating data over here too. So we were sending in some data for gender and status. Now there's an easier way of doing this. Instead of sending same data over and over again, you can use a library called faker.js. And the way Faker works is it basically allows you to generate a massive amount of fake data in your basically browser, or you can do it through Node.js. So we can actually verify that if I scroll down, the way you would use this is I can say, hey, faker.name, and give me a name. So it would just give me a random name. I can get a random email or random some information like contact card information. And their API is quite big. So you can get like address and basically company information, DB, date. Oh, there's so many stuff over here. So what we will do is import this and then take advantage of this in our test. So I'm going to head back to our test and then get this imported. So to do that, we will simply do npm install faker. This would install the faker package. Okay, so our package is installed. Now let's try to require it over here. So I'm going to simply just do const faker and then do require faker. Okay, now let's try to update this in our test. So let's see what we can do. So we are using this, we're creating this post over here, right? So instead of doing this title, I can change this up with some random title. So I can do faker dot, and they have something, and if you can take a look over here, right? Like I can use so many stuff here. I will simply use something called lorem, which would generate a random sentence for me. And I can say, hey, if I need a line, a paragraph, or a sentence, I'll say, okay, I need a sentence. And then I can do same thing here. Instead of doing a simple one-liner, I can do lorem.paragraph. And then this would give me like a bunch of paragraphs. So that's pretty cool. Now, if I try to run this, what I'm going to do is simply try to log this out to see how it would actually print out. I would just do data and then run this particular test here. See if this works for me. Only. Right, let me run this and then you will see exactly what it will generate. Okay, there you go. So if I'll just move this up. So we have our title. This is just like a random sentence it generated. And then we have this huge paragraphs over here that it generated for us. So this is pretty cool, right? Like it was able to generate this title as well as body. So this is more like a real life scenario where someone would be creating a title and they won't create like something called my title, right? They would probably create something big as this, and they probably add a body which would be much longer than what we were using one-liner. So this makes our test much more realistic while we are generating a random data over here through lorem ipsum, but it's still a lot more text. Now, instead of, in fact, putting it over here, it's better to just use this one-liner and it would generate automatically for us. So that's pretty cool. And we can use this in other places too. So for example, we were creating this random user here. So instead of using this email, I can go ahead and just update it with my random faker user. So I can actually, you know what, let me just copy this, paste it here, and I can just say create random user and call this one with faker. and I will require faker here once again. So I'll do require faker. And then for email, we saw that we can actually use an email there. So I don't need to do math.random. I can simply do faker.internet.email. And then it would, I can even say that, oh, it should take this first name or something, but I'm fine. I just want a random email. That's good enough. I can do the same thing for faker.name.firstname. It would give me a nice first name. So now what it will do is it will create a data with a new email and a new name. So I'm going to try to run this and actually import this first. I'm going to come in here. Instead of doing create random user, I would copy this. And then I'm say create random user with faker. And this would also import it for me over here. And if I'm going to run this now, it will create a random user with my particular ID and all this data. So we can verify this by just printing it over here. So I can do log, let's do log the response body. And I'm going to run the same test again. This time I'm going to remove this console log. If I hit run, we will see that it will create a new email as well as new first name. We can change that to just name, where it will create both first name and last name for us. There you go, it did. So it created this new name called Ike, and then created this concepcion35@gmail.com. That's perfect. So it actually ended up creating this for us, and that's really nice. And every time I'm going to run this, it's going to create something new for me. And so this is, I think, a lot more realistic test scenarios, and you can use this pretty much anywhere you're using data, and it will actually create like a more real looking test data for us. So Faker is a really cool library, and I use this pretty much everywhere else. I mean, you can update this to your wherever you're using your data and just create random data through Faker. So that was one of the optimization. The last one we're going to look at is, if we notice here, we are using our token, and typically you wouldn't put your token directly in your code because it's not safe. When you will put it to GitHub or something, people can actually see your token over here. So what you would rather do is put it in some kind of environment file, and you can access that environment file directly, or you can keep it locally. And then when you will actually run this, your test would read from the environment file and it would pick up that token. Same thing for when you're pushing it on, let's say CI/CD, you would have that environment variable stored in your actual CI/CD pipeline, so that your test will pick it up from there instead of you hard coding it in your actual code base. So let's see how we can change that too. So what I'm going to do is, for the environment file, I'm going to create a new .n file here. And then I would simply paste my token that we created over there. So I will just do token and actually name this maybe user token. And then paste this here. There you go. We can have multiple environment variable here, but I just kept this one as the first one. And then what I'm going to do is remove this from here. In order to access it, we're going to have to install another library. And this time the library we're going to use is which can actually read from our environment variable files, and which is called .n. So I'm going to do npm install .n. So this will allow me to read my environment variable file. Otherwise, I cannot directly read from it. So something didn't work properly. Oh, I spelled this wrong. It should be npm install, or I can just do I. So now I will use it, and I can do that by simply doing here require, and I can put .n, and you would do .config. So this would actually read it from the configuration, which is the environment variable file. Now if I'm actually running my test, now here's just make something to note here that we are not actually using the token anymore. So our token is stored in our environment variable file. So to access it, let's see how we can do that. I'm going to create a new variable, and I can create it here. I'm going to say const token equals process.environment.user token, because that's what we named it over there. And I'm going to save this. Now I'm going to try to run my test to see if my test is still working. Oh, not install. Do npm test. Okay, awesome. So our test ran, it successfully passed. It was printing out all these details too. So there you go, guys. Our code is a lot more cleaner now. We moved all the common stuff over here, like base URL is stored here. You can have different base URL for your QA, test, dev, etc. And then we have all configuration file related common config over here. We also created this helper file, which allows to create random user, which is pretty nice. And then we are using Faker to actually generate random user or to generate random data. And obviously we created just now this .env file, which allow us to securely store our token or any other secure information. So that's it, guys. Our test framework is pretty much created now. In the next video, we will start focusing on how we can create a report using Mochawesome. And in the video after that, we will integrate it with Jenkins. That's it for this video, guys. If you like the video, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. All right, I will see you in the next one. Hey, how's it going, guys? In this video, we'll take a look at how to get reporting set up for our test. So far, we have been printing the results out on the console. So in this video, we'll generate our HTML report using Mochawesome HTML Reporter. So let's get started. Hey, welcome back everyone. If this is your first time on this channel, please make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified of my newly uploaded content. So let's take a look at the Mochawesome npm package to see how we can set up our reporting. Alright, so I'm here on the Mochawesome npm package. I will add a link in the description below so that you guys can access this. And basically to set this up, well, first of all, what Mochawesome is. So it's basically a custom reporter for JavaScript testing framework, which is Mocha, and hence the name Mochawesome. And what it does is it allows us to generate a nice reporter like this. So this is basically, it will tell you the amount. Let me see if I can open it in a new image. Yep, there you go. I'll zoom in. Okay, so it generates a report like this and it will tell you the number of tests that are passed, the ones that are failed, as well as the pending test. And you can see like a nice report over here. And the ones that fails, it will tell you the error that why it failed. And for the passing, you can see the different details for that too. So this is pretty nice. We will actually generate that. And this is much better than using the console reporter than we have been using so far. And so yeah, that's what they have. Some of the features, it's clean, modern design, and the support for test and suit nesting. So even if we create multiple suits, it will even support that. And you can even see the test code inline. Well, this is not really like a great feature that they have. It is possible to do that, but if you're not using, let's say, latest JavaScript, in our test, we are using async await. So it doesn't really work well with that, but at least it's a feature that just works. So if a test fails, you can at least see what's going on there. So to get this set up, what we will do is actually do the installation for npm install Mochawesome. So that's pretty straightforward. Once we do that, all we have to do is just run it using this parameter over here. So we'll do -- reporter Mochawesome, or we can also programmatically, we can customize it, but we're going to use this way. This is much easier. So I'm going to copy this and then head over to a code section to actually run our test. All right, so I'm going to paste the code that I copied from there and I'm going to hit enter. This will install the Mochawesome package for us, and then hopefully we should be able to use it right after that. So using this is pretty straightforward. All you have to do is, so far we have been running a test by doing npm test. This time what we're going to do is just add in -reporter and then just say Mochawesome. This will automatically generate a report for us, Mochawesome, and you can see a new folder being created over here once we actually run this. And then it will have an HTML file which we can open up and see the beautiful report that it will generate for us. So I'm going to hit enter now. All right, so if you notice here, it says the report HTML saved to Mochawesome report /mochawesome.html. And I don't see that over here right now, but if I just refresh, there you go. I got that new folder created for me. And I have this mochawesome.html report. It also generated a .json report, where you can actually see the number of suits, the test, how many passed, how many failed, and the ones that are failing. Well, one is probably because of this delete test, which we originally created, and we are deleting something that is not there. So it will say resource not found, that's expected. And another one, I actually failed it on purpose. I passed in wrong data for the post test, and it's actually giving us this error. I just want to fail it so that we can see how the failed test would look like. So our JSON report is nice. It will tell us all the details. So actually, if you want to create your own report too, you can take this JSON detail and create your own HTML report also. But for now, we won't do that. We will simply go to the Mochawesome HTML and then we'll see how this works. Okay, so I just opened up the report and this is basically how the report looks. It's similar to the one that we were looking at before. So it told me, okay, overall it took 17.5 seconds to run all the tests. Out of those, we ran total 16 tests, 14 passed and 2 failed. And if I click on just the past one, I can see all the past tests over here. It will just do a filter and I can see everything that's over here. I can open this up and it will show me some code snippet. Now this one does not really make any sense because we are actually using async await and it's not able to convert that properly. But if I scroll down to the ones that we are using the straightforward ones, here this one it looks much better. It's saying request.get and .concat. Even this one, it's actually converting into plain JavaScript. So it's adding concat, token and all of that stuff. So it's not able to read ES6 and higher syntax. Now there might be some way to do that, but for the moment, we won't worry about that too much. I just wanted to show you how you can generate your own reports. Now, if I want to take a look at all the failed ones, I can click here on the cross sign over there and it will tell me. So this is the same error we were looking at the console. So it's telling me, okay, object must be an array, map or something, right? But the best part is it tells us which line it failed, so we can actually go in there and verify what's going on. This is really easy for us to quickly debug and find out what's going on with that test. Same thing for the other one. If I open this up, it actually tells me, yep, resource not found to equal null. This is the same thing that we were actually looking at. So the advantage of this is instead of looking at a big console log report, we can actually just print this out or generate this HTML report, plug it into our CI/CD, and then it will every night or depending on how often you're running your tests, maybe after every build, it will generate this report for you. You can go ahead and take a look which one failed, and then you can actually go ahead and troubleshoot those errors from there on. So I'm going to go back to our test and make some quick changes here. So far we have been running a test this way, test reporter. What instead we will do is just set up our own script so that we don't have to do all of this stuff. So to do that, I will just go to package.json. And so far we already have this npm test script. I will add another one. And now this time I can call this test HTML. And then I can just simply do Mocha. I will do the same timeout there also. And then I will just say reporter, Mochawesome. Now this will allow us to actually not have to type all of this in. Instead, I can just do npm test-html. And this would run, well, it won't run right now. I have to do npm run test.html so that it will run that report. There you go. This time it's actually running that way. So we don't have to type all of that stuff in, and this will just make it super easy for us. And this is also nice if you're running it on CI/CD. We just type in this command. Even if you come in and change this report to some other reporter, you don't have to worry about that because we're still using the same script, which is test.html. And you can come in here, maybe replace it with some other HTML reporter. All right, so this worked for us. It generated some report. We have some test failures, which are expected. And I will go and open up our test to see if it's still generating. If I just refresh. Yep, this is all good. So that was it, guys, in terms of Mochawesome Reporter. As you saw, it's really easy to set it up. In the next video, I will show you guys how you can integrate your test with Jenkins. Now, if you'd like to support me, there are a few ways to do that. First off, you can hit that like button if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you have the means, you can also support me by buying me a cup of coffee. I will add the link in the description below for that. Hey, how's it going, everyone? In this video, I will cover how to integrate our API test with Jenkins and integrate JUnit reporting with it. So let's get started. Hey there, welcome to Automation Bro. If this is your first time on the channel, thank you for clicking on this video. I create new content related to testing and automation every week. And if this is something you're interested in, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified of my new content. Okay, now let's take a look at how we can integrate our tests with Jenkins. But before we do that, I just want to mention that I will not be covering how to install Jenkins locally in this video, as I've already covered that in one of my previous videos. I will add a link in the description below for that if you guys want to watch that. For this video, I will assume that you already have set up Jenkins locally and also have your admin user set up. So now let's go ahead and set up our Jenkins job. So what I'm going to do is actually sign in here. So I already have a job set up here for WebDriver.io, which I did that in my WebDriver.io tutorial series. But for you guys, most likely this will be empty. And what you can do is click on the new item here. And then just simply type in the name of your pipeline or the project that you will be creating. So I will call this one my API tests. And I will select freestyle project. And I'm going to click OK. So here is going to give me a bunch of options that I can pick and choose from. So my description, I can add something about the project over here. And I can say, I don't know, super API test. So we will put that over here. You can put anything here, doesn't matter. And it will tell you for the source code management. Now this is the most important part. So I'm using Git. So I'm going to do Git here. And this will ask you to put your repository URL of the Git repository. So I have already did that. I've pushed all of my changes to GitHub. And this is my repository here. By the way, if you guys haven't checked this out, make sure to do so, as you will have access to all the code that I have explained in this video so far, and also how to get started with your test. All right, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, just click on this code here, then copy this HTTPS URL. I can do that by clicking on this copy button here. Then go back to my Jenkins and I will paste that over here. So for my credentials, I already have that set up, but if you don't have credentials set up, you can click on add and then do Jenkins. So this will ask you to put your username password for GitHub. And so you can do that. You just put your Git username password and then just do add. This will add in your GitHub credentials for you guys. So this is done for me. So I'm going to close that out and I'm going to select my credentials here for Automation Bro as well as my password. And then it will ask you which branch you want to pick. I'm on my master branch, so I will just go ahead and pick the master branch. Then you can scroll down and there's a couple other options that are important. So for the environment, we won't worry about that too much. For the triggers, we're going to leave it as it is. But for the build step, I'm going to add in my build step here. Now I'm using Windows, so I'm going to select the Windows batch command. If you're using Mac, you can probably choose the shell command here. So I'm going to click on Windows batch. And here I'm going to type in the command. So this is basically the same command that you would run when you're running your test. So if I come over here, so if you notice what I'm saying is clone the repo and then do npm install and then run the test by npm test. So this is the same thing we're going to do. So I will do first of all npm install. So this will install all of my packages. I'm going to add another build step and I'm going to do npm test to run all of my tests. And this is nothing new. We have been doing that so far in all of our videos. And what I'm going to do for now is just click save. Then I will try to run this and I can do that by clicking on this build now button. So there you go. It started a build for me. And if I open this up by clicking on this circle over here, so this will actually tell me what it's doing. So if you notice here, it's doing npm install. And by the way, it also pulled all the changes for me. And I can see that here I have my commit message that I put recently, which is the Mochawesome report. And then it will do the npm install to install all of the packages. So I'm going to wait until all of this is done. And after this, it will actually run our test too. So I'll be back once this finishes. So the job has finished running. And if I scroll up, you will notice that it did npm install to install all the packages. And then it did npm test to actually run all our tests. And if you notice, these are the same tests that we were running in VS Code. And if I come over here, it is telling me 7 are passing, 9 are failing. Now what's going on with the failing test? So if you notice here, all the failing ones are either post test, put test, or probably delete over here. Yep. And the reason for that is for the get test, we don't really need a token. But for everything else, post, put, and delete, we actually need a token. So what's going on with that environment variable token that we created? So if you remember from one of our previous video, we created the .env file, and that .env is where we were actually storing our token. And I can show that to you guys if I just go over here to my code. So this is the file we created, .env, and we have our user token over here. I'm just going to quickly copy this. So this file that we actually created, I never pushed that in GitHub. And the reason for that is because you don't want to be pushing your environment variable or your secret tokens to GitHub. Because it's open, anyone can access it and they would have access to that token, right? So that's not safe. And if you notice here, I don't have that .env file over here. So what we can do is instead store that file in our Jenkins, or in fact, any CI/CD tool that you're using. To do that, let's take a look what we have to do. So I'm going to open up Jenkins in a new tab, click on Manage Jenkins, and here I will click Configure System. And if I scroll down, you will see the global properties. I have environment variables option. So if I click on this checkbox here and then just do add, here I can add in my token. So I will just do user token and then paste the token that I copied. And if I do save, now what we're going to do is when we will run our test, so let me close this quickly. So when we will run our test will actually pick up that token from the Jenkins, which we actually stored there, that from the global environment variables. So we're going to do that. I'll just click on build now here and see if that works for us. So this time it won't do the npm install. I mean, it will do that, but we already have the packages stored, so it won't really take that much of time. There you go. It already finished. and then it will actually run our test. So let's wait for this test to be finished and then we'll be back. Alright, so our tests have finished running, and this time if you notice we have 15 passing and just 1 failing. And the reason this one is failing is because if you remember from one of our earlier videos, we created this delete user ID and we don't even have that resource already, so obviously it's giving us the resource not found error, and we fixed that in one of the next video. But I still saved this test here just so we can see that we have a failure over here. So that's pretty cool. We actually have our test here, but what's going on is we actually seeing this report, right? There's no report actually that's printing out here. So to get a report for the Jenkins, what we can do is implement something called JUnit, which will basically allow us to see a reporting over here on Jenkins. So Mocha provides a nice JUnit reporter, which we can use, and it's called the Mocha JUnit reporter. So this produces a JUnit style XML test result, which we can actually plug it in our Jenkins and will show us a nice JUnit reporting. So let's see how we can do that. So I'm just going to copy this so that we can install this package and head over to our VS Code. And then simply paste that here to install this package. Alright, so my package is installed. Now to actually configure this, what I have to do is if I go to package.json. Now, before we were using this reporter Mochawesome, right? To actually use the JUnit reporting, I'm going to add in another script here and paste that, change this one to test-junit, and then update this to the Mocha JUnit that we were using, right? So I'm just going to paste the command over here. Well, not this one. The one that we copied, which is this particular thing here. And then paste that here. Okay, so this is good. So when we will actually run our test, it will generate an XML file for us and we can test that out. I'm going to do npm test. And then actually before running everything else, I just want to run one particular test to see if that prints out the XML report for me. So npm test actually won't work. So I'm going to have to do npm run test-junit. Let's see if this works. Okay, so there you go. It ran the test and this time it didn't give me the spec reporter, but instead it generated this XML file over here. Now, if I click on that, I can see the all XML data. So it will tell me the test that I ran, how long it took, and the pass and fail. So that's pretty cool. So we will actually implement this with Jenkins and see how it works. I'm going to move the dot only here. So now I'm going to push my changes and then head over to GitHub. Okay, so I'm back here on GitHub. And if you notice here, I have my, if I go to package.json, I have my Mocha JUnit reporting that I have added. So that's perfect. Now what we're going to do is take advantage of this and plug it in with our test. So I'm going to go back to configuration here on Jenkins. Now I'll scroll down. Now in our post build action, I'm going to click on this. You will see a JUnit reporting option here. So if you notice this one, publish JUnit test result report, I will click on that. So this actually finds the XML report for you. So you have to pass in the path. So my path, I've stored it in the root file. So I'll just do star.xml. So it will pick it up from my root file. Okay, so we're getting this error that it cannot find star.xml because we haven't ran our job yet. So that is okay. So I'm just going to save this. And then what I will do is actually run this to see if it will work for us. All right, so I'm going to do build now. So by the way, if you don't see that JUnit reporting, you might have to install the plugin. And you can do that by going back to the Jenkins dashboard. And from there, just do, let me just go here, manage Jenkins. And here you're going to have options for plugins, manage plugin. And then maybe like in this scenario, I might already have a JUnit one, but if you don't have that, you can install that. So I'll do JUnit. Okay, so in my install section, if you notice, I already have this JUnit available. If you don't have that, you can just go to the available, find the JUnit and install that plugin, and that will just work for you. All right, so I'm going to go back to my Jenkins over here, just reload. So our test failed and that was fine, that's expected. But let's take a look at what happened with our JUnit reporting. So, okay, so I forgot to actually change our configuration. So not only we have to do the XML reporting there, we also have to pass in npm test. And this time I'm going to do -junit and change this to npm run test-junit. So now if I save this and run again, okay, there you go. So our test ran and we have this weird console log, which we probably should remove, but anyways. But if you notice here, this is the important part. It says recording test results. And obviously our build failed because we have one failure there. And I'm going to ignore that because it doesn't really matter if our test passed or failed. We can fix that one later on. But one thing to notice here is if I go to my last build here and click on test result, so this will actually show me my test result. So here, if I click on root and open that up, there you go. We have all our test results here. So the test that we ran total, and it will tell us the failed test, which is we have this one over here, and then every other test that we ran over here. So that's pretty cool. So that's our JUnit reporting. Now this will actually, you will see that in your, so let me just click here. So you will also see this when we, for example, if I run this again, eventually you're going to see like a dashboard here, which will tell you the amount of tests that we ran and the ones that failed. So I'm going to run this again to see if it will generate for us. So I think usually for the first time it doesn't generate, but when you run it a couple of times, it actually generates some kind of a dashboard, which will tell you the difference between your first test run and the second test run. So there you go. This is the test result trend that I was talking about. So what I did was, instead of running the entire suite, I just ran a single post file, pushed that to GitHub, and so that we can actually see a difference in our test. So if you notice, before when we were running, we had 16 tests. So originally we were just running these ones, so only 2 tests passed, then 16 tests passed, and then from there we did another build, it's showing us 16 passed. Then for the last one, what I did was, instead of running all the tests, I'm just running the 4 tests for our post file. So I did that by just doing .only, and this was only for the demonstration purposes. Another option you have is, instead of just doing .only, you can add in a couple extra tests and then push that. So anytime it will have a difference from the previous build, you will see this kind of report over here. Alright guys, so to quickly review, we created our Jenkins job and configured it. We were able to pull changes from GitHub, and then we also integrated our JUnit reporting with Jenkins. So that's pretty much it for this video guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Now if you would like to support me, there are a few ways to do that. First off, you can hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you have the means, you can also support me by buying me a cup of coffee, and I will add the link in the description below for that. Lastly, let me know in the comments below what other content you would like to see. That's all for this video guys. I will see you in the next one. Hey, how's it going guys? This is going to be the final video of this series, so I will go over quickly some of the things we covered in this series. So we started off with learning the basics of API and talked about what is an API, what is REST API, covered about what is API testing and the advantages of API testing. After that, we quickly dived into the installation as well as the configuration process to get our framework set up. Then we started off with our user.js file, where we pretty much went over and got a basic understanding of how Supertest Mocha and Chai works by covering different HTTP methods. Then we learned about how to optimize our existing test by removing our data dependencies and reorganizing our test. Here we actually moved our tests from basically first creating a post test, then a get, and then we did our put test and the delete one. This way we got our tests to be more stable and have less side effects. After that, we started to look at how to scale our test framework. This is where we implemented async awaits in our test, which made our test look a bit more cleaner. And we also added hooks in our test for our setup and teardown purposes. After that, we wrote some negative tests to increase our test coverage. So here we covered our 422 data validation failed test as well as 401 authentication failed test. And if you remember, we also added faker for our test generation over here. And we also created the .n file to securely store our token. And if you remember, we created a configuration file, which basically is where we are storing all our configuration related data. So this summed up our overall framework setup that we did from the test perspective. Then from the reporting side, we generated HTML report using the Mochawesome Reporter. And finally, we integrated our test using Jenkins and also added JUnit reported in it. Alright, so we covered quite a bit of material here. If you made it this far guys, great job. This is really a big accomplishment as you can utilize the skills and key concept to pretty much any kind of API test framework with any library or framework out there. So once again, all of this code we have covered will be available on GitHub for you to access and play around with. So feel free to fork the repository and add more tests in it. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this series. Let me know what other content you would like to see in the comments below. Now, if you'd like to support me, there are a few ways to do that. First off, you can hit that like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you have the means, you can also support me through Buy Me a Coffee website. I will add the link in the description below for that. That's all for this video guys. I will see you in the next one.